was beginning to believe I knew who you were. My master could never be as vile as you.
Don't make me kill you.
What if Ahsoka was in Revenge of the Sith? This is FanScription. It goes without saying that Ahsoka Tano has become an extremely popular character since she first debuted in the animated Clone Wars movie back in 2008. It took some time, but Anakin Skywalker's apprentice is now one of the more cherished aspects of Dave Filoni's contributions to the Star Wars canon. Appearing in multiple animated and live-action series at this point, her place in the film's timeline has become clearer the more we see her. Thanks to the 7th and final season of Clone Wars, we know exactly where she was when the events of Revenge of the Sith were taking place. But what if George Lucas and company decided to debut Ahsoka in that final prequel film before spinning off into the animated TV shows? How would her inclusion in the main storyline affect Anakin's transformation into Darth Vader, Obi-Wan's function in the narrative, or even how the series progressed into episodes 4 through 6? Let's take a stroll on the path less traveled and reshape this dark finale before a new hope arose. We're going to be breaking tradition a bit, but for this story to make sense as Ahsoka's debut and the conclusion of the prequels, it has to be done. The changes start with a heavily modified opening crawl. It speaks of the early battles of the Clone Wars and how Anakin Skywalker's bravery has led to the Padawan ascending to the title of Jedi Knight faster than most. Yet, there is still concern on the Council pertaining to his attitude and penchant for brash actions that have put his compatriots in unnecessary danger. In agreement with his former master, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Skywalker is assigned a Padawan of his own to teach him the valuable lessons of responsibility. Anakin's apprentice is a spunky yet talented teenage Togruta named Ahsoka Tano. It's described how they're on their first mission together, along with Obi-Wan and the 501st Legion of Clone Troopers. We cut to the middle of a struggle between battle droids and the clones, with the Jedi leading the way for the Republic's Grand Army. It's here where we establish the snippy early relationship between Anakin and his apprentice, in addition to introducing characters like Captain Rex. The battle itself can be any of the conflicts from the beginning of the middle of the Clone Wars. It's just here as a device to frame our new relationships. After initially taking heavy losses, the troopers begin to advance on the Separatist forces thanks to advice from Obi-Wan and his former Padawan. His sage words speak of trusting Ahsoka's unique skills while compensating for her weaknesses. A true master knows when to let his apprentice be guided by their instincts with the Force. Ahsoka shines here, showing immense potential that impresses Anakin. The Jedi trio steer the Republic to a victory. Before the end of the battle, we see a short confrontation between an isolated Obi-Wan and Count Dooku. Tyrannus introduces his new second-in-command, a lightsaber-wielding cyborg, General Grievous. Killing several of Kenobi's guards during their short encounter, Dooku snidely remarks about how ashamed Qui-Gon Jinn would be and is lifted out of the area by a Separatist escape ship with Grievous just behind. Obi-Wan is left staring up as Anakin and Ahsoka join him, feeling as if they somehow grasped defeat out of the jaws of victory. From here, we get a big old montage. I know, not standard Star Wars movie protocol, but we need to advance things after our prologue of sorts. That initial scene took place about a year after Attack of the Clones, and now we show off some highlights of the next 2 years of the war. All these events would be expounded on in the Clone Wars animated series. Ahsoka and Anakin bond, becoming as close a master and apprentice as any in the Order's recent memory. Steady and wise, Obi-Wan is at their side along the way. Count Dooku and General Grievous win the occasional battle and always elude capture. The Count continues his mocking of Obi-Wan with the memory of his dead master. Dooku often exclaims he's fighting for Qui-Gon's true legacy, and this increasingly gets under the skin of Kenobi. It's to the point where anger bubbles to the surface a few times throughout the montage, and Obi-Wan is pushed to a place we rarely saw in the prequels, if at all. The opening scene in the actual film kicks off our main story. Palpatine has been captured by the Separatists. Obi-Wan and Anakin are tasked with retrieving him as Ahsoka leads Rex and a swarm of clone troopers from her own Jedi starfighter. In this version of the timeline, we'll say Tano was tempted to leave the Jedi Order after her erroneous trial, but elected to stay on after her master's supplications. As in the movie, it's explained that Anakin and the Chancellor have become quite close in the last few years. Skywalker is fighting with a more personal intensity than usual. Grievous and Dooku have been reported to be on board the same vessel, which has Kenobi on high alert. Ahsoka is the most level-headed of the three, knowing that their enemies have done much to stir the emotions of her mentors. However, she is the least experienced and still follows their orders per usual. Ahsoka is told to lead the assault on the Separatist army above Coruscant while Anakin and Obi-Wan go after Palpatine. Skywalker's trust in his Padawan has grown exponentially since the prologue scene. He knows that portion of the battle is in good hands. Anakin and Kenobi are shown having trouble fighting their way through the flagship, and Ahsoka is made aware of this through failing comms and a darkness growing in the Force. She turns command of the small clone fleet over to Captain Rex and is able to make her way inside the main ship with a daring approach that barely damages her starfighter. Before she can find her friends, Tano is confronted by Count Dooku, and the two cross sabers. Meanwhile, Skywalker and Obi-Wan finally locate the Chancellor, who is being held by a slew of guards and General Grievous. In the melee, Obi-Wan is knocked out by Palpatine's undetected use of the Force, leading Anakin to eventually square off with Grievous one-on-one. In her duel with Dooku, Ahsoka is barely hanging on, evading the Count with the use of some clever maneuvering. Up above, we see Rex recognize an opening and call for a full strike on the ship, disabling its defenses and shields. The impact is felt throughout the vessel, leading to Dooku reluctantly parting with a nearly defeated Ahsoka. He leaves with an angry word about the Padawan's distraction spoiling his plans. An escape ship shows up and whisks him away from the disintegrating Separatist craft. In a mad dash, Ahsoka recovers and advances towards Palpatine's position. Tano gets there just in time to hear the Chancellor's orders to kill the vulnerable Grievous. Anakin hesitates at first, but follows through with the killing blow. I know I did this in my Qui-Gon prequel video, but we still need an event like this to further Anakin's turn. Ahsoka is shocked by her master's actions and stays hidden until the ship shifts again. Tano recovers Obi-Wan as Anakin chastises her for disobeying him. With Palpatine, they all flee the ship and Ahsoka's cramped starfighter, as Rex is given the final order to destroy the large vessel. The scenes that follow are more character-focused. Anakin reunites with Padme after not seeing her for a few months. In this version, she is pregnant, but not really showing much yet, and covering it up convincingly. However, in our iteration of the story, she elects to not tell Anakin yet. With the Clone Wars nearly at an end and another mission calling him away again soon, she doesn't want her husband distracted by domestic matters just yet. Senator Amidala elects to wait on telling Skywalker and actively hides the pregnancy from him in their brief moments of privacy. Concurrently, Ahsoka grows concerned about what she saw up on the Separatist ship. Her master disobeyed the Jedi Code and seemed to be more loyal to Palpatine himself than what the Republic is supposed to stand for. This makes their interactions more awkward and cursory as she mulls over how to handle this gray area. Obi-Wan is called to the Council where he is questioned about some information recently discovered concerning his old master, Qui-Gon Jinn. There's been reasonable belief within the Order recently that Qui-Gon was helping Dooku and the Separatists in their early formation. Obi-Wan is questioned about the truth of these matters, and he vehemently denies it. Qui-Gon was known as a bit of an unorthodox Jedi, not always agreeing with the majority, but Kenobi can't fathom him helping Dooku in this pursuit, even if Jinn was once the Count's Padawan. This further increases his frustrations with how Dooku has been aiming to destroy Qui-Gon's reputation since the Clone Wars started. Following this exchange, many of the same events in the movie still happen. Palpatine places Anakin on the Jedi Council, to the Master's chagrin. Skywalker has dreams of Padme's death, the Chancellor continues to manipulate his young friend, Yoda travels to Kashyyyk, and Obi-Wan heads off to Utapau. Ahsoka's storyline during this period will involve inner conflict about her master's seemingly changing morals. There's a scene where she asks Padme about his recent altered demeanor. She knows they're close friends, but suspects something more, and through a few questions and reading of the Force, Ahsoka is able to discover Skywalker and Amidala's relationship. Padme never comes out and admits it. However, Tano leaves the conversation with more concern than ever. She wrestles with what the right course of action is, as she's sent out on a mission with Rex and some of the other crew. Anakin's big turn still happens, where he's manipulated into striking Mace Windu and swears fealty to Palps. Ahsoka's position in all this is kind of similar to the Clone Wars episode where we see her perspective on the events of Episode 3. Order 66 goes through, and her troopers turn on her. This time, however, Rex's behavioral modification chip isn't removed, and Tano barely makes it out alive through an escape pod. Meanwhile, on Utapau, Obi-Wan ends up battling Count Dooku, who takes advantage of Kenobi's emotional state and the turning of the clone troopers. Obi-Wan is still struggling to keep his head clear, with Dooku bringing up Qui-Gon again. This leads to the Count winning their duel, but instead of killing the younger Jedi, he knocks him out with the hilt of his lightsaber. Keeping a low profile, Ahsoka returns to Coruscant and sees the chaos firsthand. The Jedi Temple is destroyed, and Obi-Wan is not responding to any communication. There isn't a friend in sight, except Yoda, who reluctantly shows Tano the security footage of Anakin's misdeeds. She's able to sneak into Padme's quarters and hesitantly confronts her about her relationship with Skywalker. Padme breaks down and admits that she's pregnant. However, Amidala has kept it from her husband over a growing fear of the darkness inside him becoming more apparent. She's barely seen him since she's been on Coruscant. Ahsoka is able to convince Padme that together they can still pull him back to the light, and mutually assured, they decide to travel to Mustafar. Yoda and the Emperor fight to a similar conclusion as in the film, while on Utapau, Count Dooku shows a confined Obi-Wan evidence of Anakin's turn to the dark side and the true identity of Palpatine as Darth Sidious. He's told of Skywalker's presence on Mustafar, awaiting the Emperor's orders. The news breaks down Kenobi's mental state even more. Dooku tries to twist his mind into joining him in taking down Palpatine and restoring true peace to the galaxy. It's what his master would have wanted, he says. This triggers Kenobi into a burst of spontaneous action. He breaks his bonds, retrieves his lightsaber, takes down the Count's droids, and clashes with him again, this time with much more intensity inside the Separatist compound. On Mustafar, Padme's ship arrives to a surprised Anakin. They embrace as Amidala confesses she brought a visitor. Ahsoka steps out of the vessel and, with a disappointed and emotional tone, confronts her master. At first, he proclaims all the good he's doing to finally bring peace to the galaxy. The Jedi have failed, and they must be eliminated, a process he's already begun. Anakin wants Padme at his side to rule, and Ahsoka at his side on the battlefield. This is something Obi-Wan will never understand, and he will be dealt with. But Skywalker knows the problems Ahsoka has had with the Jedi Order. He goes on a distorted appeal for Tano to join him then and there. There's much work to be done. The pair, who traveled with the hope of talking some sense into the powerful Force wielder, step back upon hearing such evil. They look at him horrified. Obvious that they see him as a monster, the rage of the dark side erupts from within. Skywalker snaps at both his wife and apprentice. Using his powers, he grabs his wife by the throat with exclamations of treason. Unlike Obi-Wan, Ahsoka springs into action right away. Padme falls to the ground. The master and apprentice cross sabers with heavy emotion flowing from both sides. Back on Utapau, Obi-Wan furiously bests Count Dooku. Before the killing strike, a whisper of Qui-Gon Jinn is heard in Kenobi's ear. It's left vague if this is Qui-Gon reaching out through the Force or an old lesson replaying in Obi-Wan's head. He tells his former apprentice to put aside his anger and to never stain his honor by killing a defeated, injured opponent. Logically, the old man will not live much longer under the Emperor, and there are more pressing matters at hand, as Anakin's soul hangs in the balance. Time is of the essence. Obi-Wan withdraws and starts to walk away with only a brief stare of disdain to the Count. Dooku screams for Kenobi to come back and tries riling him up with more insults. When that doesn't work, the injured former Jedi struggles to his feet and with a last gasp leaps across the room at Obi-Wan. The old man is quicker than expected, leaving Kenobi without a chance to reach for his saber. On instinct, he grabs Dooku's curved hilt as the crimson beam brushes close to his throat and with a single motion stabs the Count through the abdomen. Dooku falls, dead. Obi-Wan stands in shock. He holds a red lightsaber over the body of another fallen Jedi. It's not lost on him that the Count's death is remarkably similar to Qui-Gon's in positioning. Disgusted with himself, he throws the Sith blade to the ground and rushes off. Ahsoka's battle with Anakin is an epic one. They fight with fervor among the lava of Mustafar. Skywalker is clearly the more skilled duelist, but Ahsoka's feelings of betrayal lead to a much more wild fighting style. Palpatine shows up at this point and yells for his apprentice to destroy Tano as his final trial to truly embrace the dark side. Outmatched and hurt, Ahsoka makes a final appeal to the light inside her master. She goes against Padmé's wishes and tells Anakin of his unborn child. Is the dark legacy he's creating the one he truly wants for his child? Ahsoka pointedly asks. The next generation of Skywalker will now be likened to the slave traders from Anakin's youth. He and they will become the oppressors the boy from Tatooine spent his life fighting. This revelation reaches Skywalker on a deep level. The visible conflict in his physical response leads to Palpatine trying to strike Ahsoka down with Force lightning. However, Skywalker jumps to her aid and absorbs the lightning with his saber. The Emperor is taken aback, but after a moment, processing that his plan has failed, he draws his own lightsaber. Palpatine and Anakin begin a personal war. The sheer power of their clash is physically felt by Ahsoka and the surrounding clone troopers. As the Emperor and his turned apprentice go deeper into combat, Tano defends herself from the clones. This is when Obi-Wan shows up. In the distance, he sees Anakin fighting Palpatine and Ahsoka trying her best to fend off the troopers. Before he can dash in to help, he spots Padmé's unconscious body on the ground and brings her into her ship. Amidala barely comes to, but is pleasantly surprised to see her old friend by her side. On board, C-3PO informs Kenobi of the pregnancy and that they have to act fast. In addition to Padmé's peril, the Emperor can sense the presence of Kenobi after seeing the ship arrive. He instructs his troops to blow up Amidala's vessel. Anakin at once tries to intervene, but he's unable to flee from Palpatine, who blocks his path in every direction, eventually blasting him with an abundant amount of Force lightning. Ahsoka strikes down several troopers desperately, but one is able to break through and fires his mortar toward the ship. We see everyone's perspective as the bomb screams forward. Ahsoka is blasted in the leg and is left helpless. Palpatine takes delight in forcing Anakin to watch, while the lightning still flows through his body. Everything goes silent. Then, the ship turns into flames following a concussive explosion. Wails of agony fill the air as Ahsoka and Skywalker react to the horror. Anakin's screams are silenced by the distinct sound of the Emperor's lightsaber piercing his heart from the back. The deformed Sith leans over and whispers in his Vader's ear.
Look at what your hubris has wrought. I could have saved her. You could have been so much more.
With that, he retracts the saber and Anakin Skywalker falls over, life leaving him. Standing close to a cliff, Palpatine slowly nudges Anakin over. We see his tearful face fall away from the camera and plunge into the fiery depths below. Far from Anakin's death, Ahsoka can still feel his demise through the Force. In a tearful fit, she takes out the last clone and hobbles to the smoking wreck site. She removes a panel to see Obi-Wan, singed and barely conscious, but clutching something. Ahsoka turns him over to see a baby boy crying and virtually unharmed in Kenobi's arms. Palpatine approaches in the distance with backup troopers. Thinking quickly, she helps the Jedi to his feet as he suddenly becomes aware of his surroundings and instinctually protects the baby. She helps Obi-Wan and the child to his ship. She sees 3PO's head shorting out on the ground in front of the entrance ramp. Thinking his knowledge could be useful, she picks him up and brings him on board as well. With a final devastated look out at the hellscape and evil approaching them, she enters the ship and gets it off-world before the Empire can catch them. Palpatine looks up from the wreck site to see them exit the atmosphere and peers to Padmé's destroyed ship. It's obvious something has gotten his attention. An evil smile crosses his face and brightens his yellow eyes. After Obi-Wan recovers a while in a bacta tank, he tells Ahsoka the child should be kept away from the Emperor at all costs, but his demeanor is very different. Kenobi's spirit is completely broken. In this version, he's been through even more heartache and considers himself a failure as an apprentice, a master, a Jedi, a brother, and a friend. He gives Ahsoka a few suggestions on where to bring the child where he'll never be discovered, but Tano feels responsible for him. Obi-Wan spells out that he's finished. All he's ever done is let down the people he's cared about most, and it will be best for the kid and Ahsoka if they never saw him again. Soon enough, the fallen master hands over his lightsaber and readies the ship's escape pod. When asked where he'll go, he answers with a solemn, "I don't know." Before he leaves, he mentions that in the moments before the explosion, Padmé named the boy. He then says his goodbyes to Ahsoka and little Luke Skywalker. With the child in the care of Ahsoka, we see that Yoda still exiles himself to Dagobah, and in the last scene, the Emperor stares out into the vastness of space outside the bridge of a Star Destroyer. An officer informs him that the child, a baby girl, will survive her injuries from the ship's destruction. She's a tenacious little thing, and should make for a strong Imperial youth. The Emperor is pleased by the news, and with a disturbing grin, says,
Good. There may be hope for a Skywalker yet.
There you go. Ahsoka saves Anakin from his full turn to the dark side, kind of, but it comes at the cost of Padmé's life and Obi-Wan's faith and self-worth. This sets up a divergent original trilogy with Ahsoka raising Luke as a Force user and Palpatine raising Leia as his apprentice in Anakin's place. Could make for some interesting stories. What do you guys think? Did you have fun with this one, hate it, or have your own ideas on how it should have gone down? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time in a FanScription far, far away.